Okay, so this is a slightly different video. I will do some cycling in a minute. But I've seen on all the popular YouTube channels, the ones that actually have viewers and things, people recording loads of things about tips for new cyclists. Kind of during lockdown, loads of people are getting out bikes, buying bikes, recovering lost bikes out of sheds and trying to de-rust them things. So I thought I'd join in just for the sake of it in terms of talking about tips for people who've just begun cycling or restarted cycling recently. I've been cycling on and off for about 40 years, so I thought I would do some a few tips of my own, not quite the people who've got 50,000, 100,000, half a million viewers, and I think I've got about 6 subscribers, so it's at a different scale. But nonetheless, I took the bike out today for a potter about and tried to do some thinking about what might be useful for people cycling for the first time or getting back out there, because it can be quite intimidating. I'm in London, so that can be doubly so, but actually I think if people get started and feel confident, it's something they'll keep doing and hopefully keep enjoying in the future, but we shall see. And so let's get started. So the first of these tips is about being predictable. I saw in a really old-fashioned book called Cyclecraft. I'll put it on the screen. I think it's the best advice I took from it. It's a good old book. It's got some more recent editions of it. It just says be predictable. It's really kind of obvious when you say it, but actually if people don't know what's going to happen, they might do something that's going to endanger you. So just cycle predictably. Cycle like it's obvious what's going to happen. Don't make sudden changes. That's probably why it's good to know your route, where you're going in advance, things like that. So this has been something that I've sort of thought about loads when I've been cycling. Just how will other people know to give me space, to make room for me, to not come in front of me, whatever it might be. If it's not clear what I'm going to be doing, obviously that means signalling and doing all those kind of things. But generally speaking, I think just being aware that other people need to have some vague idea what's going to happen if they're going to make allowances for you as a road user. This bit of video is just me pottering around today in kind of Hackney, I think, and cycling around. But yeah, cycling predictably and it being obvious what you're up to sounds obvious, but I've always found it useful for me to keep in mind when I've been out on the bike. So the next kind of tip or thing that I was trying to remember is about obeying road regulations, road laws, road rules, and things of this sort. I know a lot of cyclists don't necessarily agree on this and feel that they can safely miss out on obeying all of them. I tend to, and maybe it's just my kind of habit or upbringing or whatever, but I tend to be quite road observant or compliant with rules. I tend to always think if I want other road users to obey the rules, and I really do want other road users, especially big lorries and things, to obey the buses, there's one, to obey the rules, then I sort of should myself. And I worry that if I endlessly jump red lights and things like this, I'm also creating a culture where people think cyclists are bad and don't obey the rules and don't feel well inclined towards them. So I kind of obey them, partly as the previous point, to be predictable so that people know what I'm doing, partly because I think it helps everybody if think about obeying the rules, which is better for everybody. That makes it sound very noble and some kind of social contract thing, but perhaps that's true. Perhaps this is kind of I know that other cyclists don't always feel this way, but that is what feels comfortable for me and what I feel comfortable in terms of encouraging in other people's behaviour. So I tend to obey the rules and stop at red lights and things like this, partly because I think it might be dangerous not to, but secondly I think about some kind of wider cultural influence point of some kind at least. I hope there isn't a video at this point of me breaking any rules I'm not aware of, but mostly, and certainly important things like stopping at crossings for pedestrians and obeying red lights and things of this sort. Okay, the next thing in my catalogue of the bleeding obvious is paying attention, being aware. And it's not so much just awareness, because surely people need to know what's around them. People think that, but I guess that means not doing too much talking on the phone or listening to music. For me, I don't feel comfortable listening to music. But the point I kind of wanted to make that I've noticed a lot more recently, cycling around London and elsewhere, some point in this video here of me being stuck in traffic in Hackney, is that listening is really important, and it's part of building up a kind of picture of what's around you, the kind of situational awareness. But the kind of advent of more and more electronic cars, and the use of kind of Uber drivers using kind of silent cars, means that listening now doesn't seem to be enough, and especially with often electric scooters and things. So often you might think it's silent behind you and start to move across and maybe look to turn and indicate, only to discover there's kind of silent hybrid car creeping up to you. So I think not just listening but looking as well has suddenly become even more important than it ever was. Cycle lanes are fantastic, and there's ever more of them in London. I think that's a fantastic thing. But as you can see here, they're not always just got cyclists in them. So here, we're trying to cycle along behind some of the cyclists, and there's a van trying to pull out, and maybe he should have not been there, but actually he may have just got stuck there, and it perhaps wasn't his fault. Either way, he was very apologetic, and that was fine, but we have to be aware. Here, you'll see a kind of common thing. Somebody is parked, unloading, or actually they're loading a door in the cycle lane. So you need to be really aware of that. And here you see a lot of buses discharge their passengers directly into cycle lanes. So cycle lanes are fantastic, but you really need to be switched on to what might be going on in them as well as cycling. Often they're kind of shared with pedestrians, or the interface between pedestrians and vehicles. So that can be something you need to be kind of switched on about. The other kind of thing I'll mention at this point is that most rides don't have disasters of any kind. But nonetheless, despite being hugely optimistic, I'm always thinking that something bad is probably going to happen to me when I'm out cycling. So I do always take a spare inner tube or two, and a pump and a multi-tool, and vaguely know how to use them. So I think, imagining what will happen if I suddenly get a puncture, how far away will I be? Will I be able to walk back? All sorts of boring things like that are probably really important. I also always carry a phone. I try and make sure my phone is charged. And in the back of my phone, I always have a £10 note, ostensibly for disasters, so I could use cash to either try and get a lift, or go to a shop and make a call and buy coffee, whatever. But I have some cash on me. In reality, I tend to occasionally break out and buy a Mr. Whippy from an ice cream van and hope that nothing bad happens, but then I have to replace it. But I think having at least some bits and bobs with you that make you feel that if the bike gets a puncture, which is the most common problem, or something comes loose, that you can tighten it up again, or you can kind of fix a puncture at the very least, or you can make a phone call. You know, have some means if things let you down. And even though I'm riding the daylight here, I always have my lights on if I remember to, so that if I get horrendously lost and it gets dark, which has happened to me numerous times, I'm not left cycling home without any lights on in the pitch black, because I just couldn't be bothered taking that day, or want to save the weight, or whatever me. So I kind of hope for the best, but always, with cycling at least, prepare for the worst. This may usually be a kind of personal one, but I've always found that actually being really kind of polite and smiling and cheerful and all that seems to get that sort of response back from the people. I'm not kind of a road ragey kind of person, I guess, so I tend not to go down that route anyway. But I tend to find that being apologetic when I make mistakes, which I do, and being flawed, and things like this tends to elicit a response from drivers or other motorists, other road users, that isn't quite as grumpy as if I'm sort of always self-righteous. And the thing that I would say is, at junctions where you're not sure if someone's coming out or not, I've always tried to, and this seems to weirdly work, make eye contact with them. Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes you can kind of get a good reaction from people, but what you can almost always tell is whether they've seen you or not. So in the effort to make eye contact with people, there is a process of realising that they just haven't seen you, and you might need to then slow down, whether or not you've got the right of way, you might want to take the correct action, or whether or not they've seen you, and then they tend to be smiling. But I think we're recognising that motorists are just as human as most of us cyclists are also drivers at various points. So I think actually trying to make human connection with people out on the road, even if they're in big cars that we're scared of, is sensible. And the same, trying to make eye contact junctions seems to be a kind of really obvious thing, but something that's been, I found, really reassuring when I know that someone is seeing me properly and sees that I'm a person, and probably is less inclined to come zooming out of the side junction right at me. I guess the final point is that, and I would say this as someone who spent most of their life cycling, is that people going out on their bikes and getting kind of into it, just enjoy it. Just have a fantastic time. Don't feel intimidated by how fancy other people's bikes are, how fancy other people's kits are, any supposed rules about what you should or shouldn't wear. I'd say wear a helmet as a sensible advice, because I feel uncomfortable without it. I've worn them so long now that if I go out without one, I just feel like I'm inevitably going to crack my head against the pavement. People have a variety of views, but I would say don't let yourself feel intimidated that you're doing it wrong. If you're staying fairly safe and you're getting where you need to go and you're having a great time, then you're doing it right. And I think so. I think for cyclists, there are lots of rules, and I'll say in one of the books, the rules that I really like is the one that says if you're out in really rough weather and you're still out there, you're a kind of badass cyclist. I think that's pretty good. But all the ones saying what you should and shouldn't carry, what kind of saddlebag you should have and things, although I enjoy that book, I think you can ignore as a new cyclist. You can do whatever you like to get out there and have a fantastic time on the road with the rest of us.